Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about the micro-budget modern-day Western, or at least modern day in the sense that it was set in the then contemporary 1970s when it was made, Treasure of Tayopa. And the movie begins with us meeting our occasional narrator who tells us the legend of the lost treasure of Tayopa, tons of precious metals lying somewhere in the Sierra Mountains, and the fact that many expeditions that have set out to find it, and how they have all come to terrible ends. We then dissolve to the latest such expedition, an American group being organised by one Catherine Delgadillo. Ms. Delgadillo has asked her friend Tom to organise the men for this expedition, and old Tom seems to have interpreted that request as hire the first couple of guys you find in a bar. One of the men seems okay, if not all that bright, but the other, the unfortunately named Sally, is clearly madder than the many rattlesnakes they're likely to come across on their journey. Seemingly oblivious to or uncaring about Sally's obviously violent pathology, though given we're talking about a man who kisses his crossbow when he sets out on a journey, we presumably have to say it's the latter. I'm not sure how you could be oblivious. Tom and Catherine lead their small expedition into the wilderness with grand dreams of finding nigh unimaginable wealth. Between malevolent locals, Sally's psychosis, and their own unmitigated stupidity, however, it is safe to say that the odds are stacked against them. So, also known as Tayopa Gold and Raiders of the Treasure of Tayopa, this Z-grade, or Z-grade if you're American, flick takes as its inspiration the real-world myth of a lost silver mine in the Sierra Mountains of Mexico. It's not a film with much to recommend it as a viewing experience, but it is kind of an interesting one to talk about, though, because it's a rather strange movie all around. Before I get into some of those elements, however, I need to provide a couple of content warnings. I think it's unlikely you will somehow get to the end of this video and still want to watch Treasure of Tayopa, but just in case, there are two things that I should definitely warn you about if you do ever plan to sit down and watch this. First, snakes. They're not a focus of the film, unlike, say, a film like Rattlers, but rattlesnakes do appear in multiple scenes over the 70-some minute runtime of this movie. Secondly, animal cruelty. This movie predates the requirement that the American Humane Association be permitted to monitor animals on set, and it includes footage of a real cockfight, as well as a scene where one of those rattlesnakes that appears on screen from time to time is genuinely killed and eaten. That sort of thing used to happen a lot in low-budget 1970s films, believe it or not, because regularly it was cheaper to buy a rattlesnake, that had been devenomed and kill and eat it than do any kind of convincing special effects. If either of those factors is a no-go for you, you can, over and above the fact that the movie is bad, you should skip the movie. You should probably skip the movie anyway. But hey, in the interest of total fairness, let's start with what could potentially be argued to be Treasure of Tayopa's best feature. Phil Trapani's crazy-eyed performance as the psychotic Sally. Now, you won't have heard of Trapani, and there's good reason. This is his only acting credit. As you might imagine, for a total neophyte to being on screen, his performance is neither subtle nor nuanced. But then, the clearly dangerously aggressive and adversarial Sally is not a subtle or nuanced role. When Tom and Catherine's group encounter a group of Mexicans who happen to bump his horse, Sally becomes obsessed with the idea that the Mexicans plan to rob and kill the expedition members. He ignores Tom's feeble attempts to make him stay with the group, and instead Sally tracks down the Mexicans and murders them. Well, all but one of them. The one of them happened to not be there at the time he attacked. More on that plot point later. Now, as it happens, the Mexicans were planning to rob and kill the expedition members, so Sally has arguably saved everybody's lives. I'm not sure what the movie was going for here. I mean, the script's made it clear that Sally is a dangerous psychotic. But on the other hand, he was clearly right to think the Mexicans meant harm to his group. So his attack, while unjustified based on what he knew, has actually saved the entire expedition. It's kind of an odd narrative choice. Now, ultimately, of course, Sally's going to explode and commit the very crimes he suspected the Mexicans were planning. Trapani's performance during this sequence will be every bit as overblown and exaggerated as you might expect, given a first-time actor and an apparently complete lack of any direction. But I have to give him credit. His melodramatic mania is at least entertainingly over the top. Now, This is a movie that is not short on antagonists and dangers for the expedition. There's Sally, the Mexicans, the harsh environment, the one Mexican that Sally inadvertently left alive, and their own apparently inveterate stupidity. What it does seem to lack entirely, however, is a protagonist. There just isn't one. When I was planning this video, I almost said there was no point rather than no protagonist, but through the magic of its narrator, the movie does technically belabor the moral that greed kills, which of course it does when you're as stupid as these people are. So I guess it technically does have a point, if not a particularly interesting or well-executed one. But a protagonist, that definitely seems to be lacking. It can't be Tom, he's too weak-willed and pliable, always going along with other people's instructions, basically, even though he's technically the leader. It can't be the Sally, he's the final bad guy. For a while, it looks like it might be the lone surviving Mexican. He pursues the expedition after his compatriots are murdered, and for some time the film seems to be setting things up for him to interrupt Sally's inevitable rampage. In fact, it's possible that in some cuts of the film this is what happens. I've certainly seen reviews that say that's how the movie ends. But in the version I sat through, however, after messing with the Americans for a bit, such as by driving off their horses, this nameless Mexican character loses track of them and plays no role in the finale. Which leaves us with Catherine Delgadillo. Is she the protagonist? Well, I guess she funded the expedition, so she did initiate the narrative. But after that, she's essentially a passenger in the story. She makes no real impactful choices and exists mainly for the male characters to lust after. Who are we supposed to care about and identify with in this film? The answer appears to be nobody. Now, I've mentioned that the film has a narrator who appears only at the start and end of the film to do a Rob Serling-esque Twilight Zone-style intro and outro. In addition to this, however, the film also has a lot of voiceover and pseudo-narration from its cast of characters. Now, the start and end narrator is Gilbert Roland, the only member of the cast to actually have his picture on IMDb. Mr. Roland had a career that spanned nearly 60 years and over 100 roles. He was twice nominated for a Golden Globe, and he has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He was presumably hired to provide a veneer of respectability to what is clearly a micro-budget production. The Z-grade funding of the film is clear from the rest of the cast. Most of them no other on-screen credits at all, and of them all, only Phil Trapani shows any real spark of life. The frequent use of voiceover is doubtless a result of the limited budget as well. It's much easier and cheaper to add in post-production audio, particularly when you have a cast of limited ability. Making it voiceover also eliminates the need to synchronise the audio with the actors' mouths, which saves time and money. Treasure of Tiopa is a bad film with a bad script, badly acted. As a work of entertainment, it's a complete failure. But I do admit that I did get some enjoyment from thinking about the many and varied ways that it found to fail. Like, it finds lots of ways to fail, which is interesting, at least to me. But it doesn't make it a good film. Don't watch it. Next time, the year before releasing the smash hit The Mummy, Stephen Sommers made what I consider to be the best film of his career, 1998's monster action heist film, Deep Rising. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.